Hello viewers, 4DIYers here with another video for everyone. In this particular video here, I'll be showing you how to replace a piece of exhaust section on a vehicle. For this I'm using a 2015 Mazda CX9 as an example. The rear Y-pipe section has developed holes and is in need of a replacement. First is elevating the vehicle on ramps. With holes in the exhaust, this can be a safety concern as fumes from the exhaust can migrate inside the cabin. The exhaust may get rusted enough where it does fall apart on the road, also creates hot spots on the floor or other components, and causes your vehicle to sound noisy. Here's a clip of what the exhaust currently sounds like with the holes in the Y-pipe. The rest of the exhaust is still fairly solid, so the rear section is only being replaced. At the rear behind the mufflers, this has bolt-on flanges, and at the opposite side, this will need to be cut off. Use a drill or die grinder with a wire wheel to clean up the threads on the studs from the mufflers. This will make the removal much easier. These threaded studs are welded onto the mufflers, so if they do break, more work is required in order to repair this. Try to remove as much rust as possible. Penetrating oil is also applied to each of the studs to aid in the removal process. I'm trying everything possible to avoid breaking these off. Next, using the appropriate size socket. If you are working with the same vehicle, these require a 14mm. Due to the excessive rust, I hammered the socket on. However, I did find that the socket does slip because the nut is too far rusted. I moved on to using vice grips instead. Again, it wasn't breaking free. I also noticed that the vice grips were slowly peeling away the outer surface of the nut. Moving on to the top bolt, again, no luck here either. The next best possible solution is using heat. A propane torch can be used in a very mild situation, however more heat is required, so I'm using an oxygen and acetylene torch set. The nut is heated up red, and it still wasn't breaking free with the vice grips. I decided to take an alternative route, trying to split the nut in half with a chisel. This method eventually made the nut turn. Moving on to the nut above. After applying heat, I was able to break it free with the ratchet and remove it. Back to the one using the chisel method. This does take some time to get it loose. This is a common method if you have a strip fastener. The chisel will bite into the side of the fastener and eventually turn it. This does take some patience and time. Eventually, with the nut further off, I was able to remove it with vice grips and then finally by hand. Moving on to the opposite side, again the same process. Heat was applied to the bottom nut. Vice grips were used to grab onto this as the outer surface was too far rusted off. As you can see, I'm able to move it with the vice grips back and forth to help break it free. Sometimes you need to move it in both directions. Moving on to the top one now. This was heated up as well. I was able to break it free with a socket and ratchet. Careful, these nuts will hold the heat, so don't remove the fasteners by hand. Let them cool down first. Once the fasteners are removed, then is breaking the flange free. This will most likely be rusted together, so it does take some force. I did find a gap in the flange where I was able to insert a chisel and then slowly hammer the connection apart. Make sure you don't damage the flange on the muffler side. As you can see, it's finally broken free. Moving on to the opposite side, again was the same process, however this side was more stubborn. If you do decide to hit the threaded studs, install the nut first so it's flush with the tip of the threaded stud. This won't damage the threads. Then hammer on the face of that nut and stud. Now is matching up the new Y-pipe. This is needed to determine where I'm required to make the cut in the midsection. The Y-pipe will not be cut back as I want the most amount of new pipe as possible. A marker is used to lay out the cut line. This will be about 6 to 8 inches back from the end of the pipe. I'm leaving extra material on for fitment. If too much material is cut off, then it's harder to add it back. I used a sawzall to cut the old pipe out. This has a metal blade. Watch on the opposite side so it doesn't poke into anything it shouldn't, such as a fuel or brake line. I'm also avoiding using an angle grinder as the gas tank is right here. In order to remove the rubber hanger, I purchased a tool from Amazon. A link to this will be included in the video description. This is by far the easiest method to disconnect the rubber hanger. They can be stubborn at times. Penetrating oil is applied to the hanger so it helps with the removal. Use these specialty pliers to push the steel rod through the rubber. then finally remove it. Now the exhaust section can be removed completely. To feed my own curiosity, I decided to do a little sound clip of what the vehicle sounds like with no mufflers. Now the new section exhaust is put into place, and I'll determine where the final cut line is. That pipe came with an expanded inlet, however it wasn't enough, so I had a local shop with the correct tools expand the tip. They only charged me $20 for this. Again, using the Sawzall, this section of pipe is cut to the appropriate size. You may need an axle stand to hold the exhaust in place, depending on where the hangers are. Don't put too much strain on the exhaust, as it can cause damage somewhere else in the system. I used a drill with a wire wheel to help clean any rust off the exhaust, so the connection will slide into place. Sandpaper is also another option, however it does take more time. The drill with the wire wheel was also used on the flanges. We want to remove as much rust clumps as possible so it has a good seal. Then as a test fit to see how the system fits. I was finding there was still interference in the slide-on connection, so I used my OEM Tools 24417 Heavy Duty Mini Air Surface Prep Sander, which comes as a kit including various size sanding discs and abrasive pads. This is great for working in tight spaces with its compact design, and has an air consumption of 2.1 CFM at 90 psi. A link to this will be included in the video description to Mobile Distributor Supply. Another test fit, this fits perfectly. It's always a good idea to mark the depth of the expanded pipe so you know you are fully seated when pushing on the new section in place. Depending on the depth of expansion dies, this can be anywhere from 2 to 3 inches. On the opposite side with the mufflers, there was still some buildup of rust on the flanges. Again, I used the surface sander to remove any rust. A gasket will be installed between the muffler and exhaust flanges, however, we still want clean surfaces where it doesn't create any gaps. Now the gasket is installed, and then the pipe is put back into place on the one muffler. A nut is used to hold the flange into place so it doesn't become disconnected. Now I'm doing the same for the opposite side. The surface sander is used to clean up any rust on that flange. Finally the gasket is installed, and then the nuts are put into place. The old nuts were too far gone, so I purchased new replacements from a local auto parts store. Everything is then tightened into place. Make sure it's all seated correctly. I gave the exhaust a quick shake to ensure it's seated at the correct angle. Then an exhaust clamp is used on the slide-on connection. You'll need to pick the appropriate size, which is based on the diameter of pipe used. The bottom portion of the clamp is angled in such a way so it's not hanging down and catches up on anything. Ideally, it would be best to have the nuts at the full 90-degree angle, however I don't want it to interfere with the drive shaft. This will squish around the pipe, clamping the new pipe into place on the old pipe. No sealant is required here. This is an airtight fit when done correctly. The rubber hanger can be installed back into place in the exhaust pipe. Simply push it into place and it will expand over the flared hanger bracket. I went around one last time to check the nuts, ensuring they are tight. After that, the engine is started up, check for any leaks, and as you can hear, the exhaust note is substantially quieter. After that, you're officially done. New videos released every week on my channel. Be sure to hit that thumbs up button. It's a huge help to me, and leave a comment below if you found this tutorial helpful. If you're not a subscriber, be sure to also hit that subscribe button. Thank you for watching.